What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. We continue with our 2023 schedule preview projected record series. The Texas Longhorns are up next. Before we get to 2023, let's look back at 2022. Here was the schedule from last season. Of course, playing Alabama in the non-conference, that was a big deal. Some opportunities, to beat Texas Tech, to beat Oklahoma State. Alabama was right there. I don't know if people realize how close Texas was to being even maybe a playoff team last season. But you look at the schedule, the road games tripped them up a couple of times. Texas Tech, Oklahoma State. They were able to go on the road and beat Kansas State and Kansas, and those games on the road. And really, besides TCU and Alabama, they took care of business at home. So the schedule, it set up pretty well for them last year. Let's look now at 2023. Before we look at the full schedule, let's look at who they play. First of all, outside of the Big 12. So the non-conference games, which we already knew these. We have Rice, we have a road game against Alabama, and Wyoming. So it's very similar to last year. A couple of games that should be easy, and then they'll play Alabama. This time it's in Tuscaloosa, though. That's going to be a tough one. Alabama probably not going to be as good this year as they were last year, and Texas might be better, and Texas almost beat them last season. So, there may be some that say Texas has no chance in that game. I would argue that they've got a shot. It'll be tough, though, on the road, of course. Now, let's take a look at the full schedule week by week. They will open up with Rice. That'll be the first game on September 2nd. And then right there, week 2 on the road at Alabama. Obviously going to be a very tough test. Then Wyoming on September the 16th at home. So they'll play the 3 non-conference games first, and then they will get into Big 12 conference play. So they'll open up with Baylor on the road. Could be a challenging game there. That game will be on September 23rd. Then on September 30th, they play Kansas at home. Kansas was pretty good last year, so that's not one you can just show up and win. Oklahoma, they're on October the 7th. They'll play in Dallas like they always do. And then they get a bye week after that game. So they'll play 6 games and get a bye week right there at the middle point of the season. They will start the second half with the two of the new Big 12 teams, the 2 that are on their schedule, Houston and BYU. So they will not play UCF and they will not play Cincinnati, but they will play Houston and they will play BYU. They'll play Houston on the road. That's going to be a good one there. And then they play BYU at home on October 28th. So they'll get those teams back to back. Then you get into the month of November. Going to be a tough one there against Kansas State. At home, though, that's good news. Of course, that's a tough place to play. And then they'll get TCU, this time on the road. Very tough matchup there. They'll play Iowa State also on the road. And that's bad. Don't sleep on Iowa State in that spot. Back-to-back road games right after TCU. That could be a challenging game. And then Texas Tech to close things out. That'll be on Friday, so the day after Thanksgiving. And that will be a home game for Texas. So, again, you look at this full schedule. That's probably the one negative as far as how the schedule is laid out. It's the TCU Iowa State there, back-to-back road games. Interesting that they will not play Oklahoma State, the team that beat them last year, and they also will not play West Virginia. So 2 teams out of the traditional Big 12 teams, they have been replaced with Houston and BYU. Is that a good trade? Probably. I don't know that. Although Oklahoma State, they lost so much in the portal, that might not have been too tough of a test this year. And then West Virginia, also a winnable game. So it's a pretty even trade, I would say, Houston and BYU for West Virginia and Oklahoma State. Pretty even trade there. So it's basically, as far as difficulty, it's basically the same schedule they had last year. Although you could say, well, look, Alabama this time is on the road. And then in the Big 12, they have 4 true road games: Baylor, Houston, TCU, and Iowa State. But they could have 5 true road games because Oklahoma is a neutral site game. So depending on how that falls as far as home and away. So you're pretty fortunate there just to have 4 road games. The only back-to-backs on the road, again, are TCU and Iowa State, Kansas State at home, Texas Tech at home, BYU at home. So not too bad of a schedule the way it falls. But again, non-conference, it starts there with Alabama. You got to win that game if they're going to really take that next step and potentially be a playoff team. Although, I guess technically they don't have to win that game. If they lose that game, if they're competitive, they could win out and still be in that playoff picture. But it's going to be tough. It'll be tough. The Big 12 is a gauntlet. Again, Baylor on the road, Oklahoma, Houston on the road. Kansas State will be good again. TCU and Iowa State on the road. So getting through the Big 12 without a loss, I think it is going to be tough. So again, if they want to really potentially be in that playoff picture, they're going to probably need to knock off Alabama on the road, which again will be a very tough game. So schedule for Texas here, it's interesting the way it lines up. Again, my takeaways, good news, you got 5 home games, or I should say 4 home games, and then the neutral site game, only 4 true road games in the Big 12. But the road game against Alabama definitely makes this schedule a lot tougher. Here are some of the projections from last season going into the year. You see, they were 8-4 in the regular season. Our projection had them at 7-5. I actually picked this team to go 8-4, so I got the record right in my predictions. Of course, I'm not going to do any predictions until after spring. This is simply a projection based off of how tough the schedule is. The FPI, they were high on Texas last year, 9.4 and 3.2. Of course, that would include potentially a Big 12 championship game, but they had them closer to 9-3, and the over-under was at 8.5, meaning the most likely records according to Vegas would have been 8-4 or 9-3. So there was plenty of hype for Texas last year, and again, 8-4, really about what they were expected to do. You look back at the schedule here for 2023, and what we're going to do, this is the scale that we use for the projections. If it's a 50-50 game, it'll stay in the white. That's a game that I think the spread will be less than a touchdown. Under 20, over 80, games where I think the spread will be 20 or more points. 20-29, 71-80, those are games where I think the spread will be 10-19 points, in that range. And then the 30-39, 61, 70, those are games that I think the spread will be about a touchdown, 6, 7, 8 points, kind of in that range. So we'll start with the easy wins for Texas. I think you've got really just a couple of those. Rice and Wyoming, they should be 24, 28 point favorites in both of these games. Not really no chance of them losing those games. So the easy wins there, Rice and Wyoming, and that's really about it. I would say those are the only easy wins for Texas. Of course, the Big 12 is going to be really tough. There are no easy wins in this conference. I do think there are a couple of games, though, where Texas will be favored by double digits. That's Houston and BYU. Just looking at where these teams finished last year, Texas has a clear advantage, I think, and they should be favored by a couple of touchdowns in both of those games. But that's about it. Everything else here is more of a game that's going to almost could go either way. Games that where the spread is going to be about a touchdown, 6, 7, 8 points, kind of in that range. I do think Kansas, Baylor, Iowa State, Texas Tech. Texas should be favored. They should be a clear favorite in all 4 of those games, but not by a big margin. 6, 7, 8 points, like I said. You look at Baylor. They were pretty young last year. Coming back this year, they're going to be tough. That's a game on the road. Iowa State's always tough on the road. Texas Tech, they could be a surprise team this year, and of course, they beat Texas last season. And then Kansas is kind of a wild card. I'm not sure how good they're going to be. Perhaps that one should be in the blue, especially at home. But again, based off of where they finished last year, I think that's where this game should be. I think you have one game where Texas will be a clear underdog. That's Alabama on the road. I don't think they'll be big underdogs, though. 7 or 8 points probably. Texas has a chance in that one, but I do think it'll be pretty clear that Bama will be favored in that game. And that leaves Oklahoma, Kansas State, and TCU. These are your 50-50 games that could go either way. I realized that the game was not close against Oklahoma last year, but Dylan Gabriel was not in that game. It's a rivalry game. This is basically a 50-50 game every single year. It doesn't really matter about the records. Texas has been an underdog in this game many times, and it has won the game outright. So I think that one for sure is a 50-50 game. I look at Kansas State. This is going to be a quality team. I would favor Texas because it's at home, but not by much, just 3 or 4 points. So I think that's a 50-50 game. And then TCU on the road, I'd probably favor TCU right now. I know Max Duggan is gone, but they have a lot coming back, and they've really used the transfer portal to kind of reload, and that game being on the road. I think TCU would be favored, but only by about a field goal. So those are the 3 games that, Texas, if they can win those games, they'll be in good shape. But to do the projection, we count the blue and the green games as wins. We use 35% for the game against Alabama, 65% for the games of the purple. The white games, Oklahoma, Kansas State, TCU, 50% for those. and then we average it all out. So doing with this formula, you get the projected record for Texas of 8-4. So 8-4 is the projection. I think most people are going to be a little bit higher on this team. But again, when you've got Baylor, Kansas, Iowa State, Texas Tech, games that they'll be favored in, but games that they can lose. Again, lost to Texas Tech last year. So these are going to be tough games, not going to be easy wins. You got the Alabama game where they're going to be an underdog. So you can just look at it and say Alabama, Oklahoma, Kansas State, TCU, if they split those games, go 2-2 in those games, and then they split these games in the purple, that would put you at 8-4. If they can win 3 out of the 4 of the purple games, that's going to put you at 9-3. And the projection was closer to 9-3 than it was to 7-5. It was actually very close to being 9-3. I think it was like 8.4 wins. So it was really close to 9-3, but just under that number. And 8-4 is what it came out to be. So 8-4, the projection for Texas, the exact same record as last season. I personally think they'll probably do a little bit better than that. Again, my predictions won't come till later, but just using this formula, again, Texas projected to go 8-4 in 2023.